Welcome to the Sendcast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm the host of the Sendcast and the managing director of B Squared. The Sendcast is here to help improve our knowledge around Send. And there is lots of stuff we can go and read, but we're all very busy and I personally do not have the time to do all of that reading. The Sendcast is also a great way to get that same consistent message to schools, external professionals and parents. My guest this week on the podcast was Joanna Grace. Joanna is a sensory engagement inclusion specialist, as well as being a PhD expert and many other things. She's amazing. I love podcasting with her. And in this episode, we discussed the stories we hear and the stories we tell around autism. And as always, let's talk about B Squared a minute. The Sendcast is created by us here at B Squared, and Steps for Life is one of our assessment frameworks, and within Connecting Steps, and it covers functional academic skills, employability skills, and life skills for the most complex, all the way up to RQF functional skills level 2. It is designed to be used from Key Stage 4 and beyond, and here's what one of our schools says about the framework. We introduce Steps for Life having experienced the benefits of using Connecting Steps. It enables us to assess the relevant skills our post-16 learners are developing to prepare them for adult life. Steps for Life has a very similar format to B Squared's other assessment frameworks that we already use in school. This means that staff are already competent and confident in using it, and also student information is easily transferred, which saves so much time. So if you want to find out more about Steps for Life, visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through what the system can do for you. Now, let's get on with the podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing the stories we tell about autism. Discussing this topic with me is Joanna Grace. Jo is a sensory engagement inclusion specialist, doctoral researcher. I've not updated that. Have you finished that now?
I am Dr. Jo now, yeah.
Dr. Jo. That's the only person now. No other Dr. Joes. Just one Dr. Jo. Author, trainer, TEDx speaker, and founder of the Sensory Project. And Joanna has worked with people with learning disabilities and neurodivergent conditions aged from birth to old age. Welcome back to the show, Jo.
Thanks for having me back, Dale.
It's been a while.
It has. Yeah, I think I was mid-PhD the last time I was up here.
Yes. Yeah, no, it was. It was 2023, so probably when we last recorded. So a while. Okay, so the stories around autism and the causes are always controversial as people believe the stories they have been told. And the US has recently announced, and we are recording this in April 2025, that they will announce the cause of autism in September. They know. They're going to let us all know. We do not know, apparently. We have no idea. We're going to find out in just a few months, and we'll all go, that's the reason, obviously. So it's going to be another couple of years of correcting people, isn't it, Jo?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it's a bit, well, yeah, the less said about those things, the better, I think.
There's already in my social media, there are people going, we already know what the cause is. The cause is, and you just go into the comments and it is just brainwashed people.
It is very scary times, and they are telling a very particular story as they scaremonger in that way. And it's a really common story in the American context. I think we're joking about it because we recognize that that's a story that definitely needs updating. But some of these stories have been told for so long that they continue in the narratives that we encounter and we don't notice it. And it's that thing that these stories are foundational to our understanding of autistic people. And if you can spot them and call them out, then you have a way of advocating for people and you have a way of evaluating your practice, because all those analogies, like the foundations that you build on, or if you start on a railway line that's sort of slightly off, compared to another one, you end up in different places. These foundational understandings really matter to long-term outcomes and impacts. And the story that America is telling, not all of America, just like not all autistic people, is that it's a terrible disease. You get it there are big charitable organizations out there that propagate the myth that autism is a terrible disease that steals your children. And there have been some spectacularly dehumanizing advertising campaigns from big autistic charities, especially in the States, that propagate this myth. And when you are thinking that autism is a disease that takes away the person, if the person is gone, there's no need to look for the person anymore. What you focus on is the suffering that radiates out from that diseased person to everybody else. And so you see that story being told when you encounter people talking about how much they're suffering as a result of having an autistic relative. And this is not to say that it is easy to have an autistic relative, and it's not to say that there isn't suffering involved. It's just that most people who are struggling to support somebody will center that person when they talk to you about that experience of difficulty. And in these narratives, what is centered is the suffering. And so if you have a terrible disease, then you're thinking, how can I fix this disease? How can I cure? Because right after they announce what's causing it, I'm sure they're going to announce how we cure it. And if you're thinking it's a disease, then you need a cure. And if you need a cure, then you're looking for medical interventions. And what you get out of that first story, that story that this is a disease, is just panic. And if your loved one is the diseased person, it's a sort of sense of doom, isn't it? It's like there's nothing you can do because they've been taken by this thing. And
It's an incurable disease. It's once
yeah,
you have autism, it's uncurable. There's nothing. You've lost your child. You're not going to get them back. That's how, with that kind of those stories, that's how it's told.
yes, yeah. And it's something that's outside of your control, that it's this thing that is happening to you, has taken away your loved one and is just causing problems everywhere and must be fixed, must be cured. We need to find out what's causing it. And oh God, I hope nobody clips me saying just that.
Yeah,
I
this,
do
this
not
is one of
stand
those
with.
podcasts where you've really got to going, do not take any single sentence out of context.
That stands for the Sendcast as a whole, doesn't
I
it?
think
Yeah,
so.
God, imagine what we could make you sound like you were saying.
Do not. But it is true. And on Tigger's recommendation, and probably many others, I read the book Neurotribes.
Oh, yeah, wonderful book.
And that was a really hard read.
Yeah.
And I knew some of the history, nowhere near as much as I needed to. And it was not a hard read because of big words. It was a really uncomfortable, horrible read of reading around the history, eugenics, everything that went on in America, their beliefs, even now, how, as you said, with these charities and organizations, their beliefs on the causes and the outcomes. And although a lot of it is medical, we start going off into strange medical with no proof of any benefit or anything. But that's and you end up in some really weird places that if you took a step back, you wouldn't do it. But the story you're told makes you kind of believe that is actually, this is what I need to do to try and get my child back.
Yes, you see it in things like feeding special diets and things like that. That if this is a disease that is cured by a diet, then you're doing something along those lines, which is not to say that special diets don't have an impact, but it's that the reason for them is to do with the stress that person is under and how well your body is able to digest certain foods and things like that when they're stressed. And if you're thinking of it in that way, do you want a special diet or do you want the person not to be stressed so that they don't need the special diet? And it just leads you in a different direction. But I'm glad you've read Neurotypes. One of my big boasts about the subtle spectrum is that Steve Silberman wrote the foreword for it. And a lot of people don't know why I am boasting about that. But I was so excited when he agreed.
It's a really strange book. So it starts in the modern day or modern
Mm.
day-ish kind of thing, and with a family and talking about things. I was expecting to come back and have a lovely conclusion. That's not what happened. It just we caught up to the modern day, and I was expecting lots of hope.
No, it's like a history, isn't it?
It's
It's
just
a
a
history and it
history,
just gets you to where we are. Yeah.
and all I can say is after reading that book, I'm glad a lot of the research and the lead is in the UK. That's how the book, I kind of felt it towards the end, is more modern research, and what we're doing in the UK is leading the way and changing things like DSM. I'm very hopeful for that. Whereas the previous history in America with various people, maybe not what's doing best for autism, but keeping themselves in power.
That disease narrative is massive in the States, and the medicalization of autism is massive in the States. But one of the other stories that we tell about autism is that it is a consequence of bad parenting. And that story has its origins right back in the identification of autism, when people like Canna, who is the person who came up with the word, said that it was caused by cold mothers, by mothers who didn't cuddle their children, didn't, interact with their children enough, weren't loving towards their children, so-called refrigerator mothers. And although nobody is thinking, I hope they're not about to announce in September that it's women causing it. Because it's interesting, isn't it, that it was cold mothers. It was just the one parent involved.
It was, yes. And that's the sort of thing is when you kind of squint at the message that book was giving me,
Yeah.
it was almost like women should be at home and loving their children. It was that, which is still that rhetoric is still going on in the US right now. And it is quite shocking. It wasn't really about the child. It was more
No,
husband work, wife stay at
it's
home.
such
It's
a
benefit for the children.
yeah, it's such a disprovable theory, isn't it? As my mother has got two children and both daughters, and one of us is autistic and one of us is not. She has mothered both of us. So if she was a cold mother, you'd think it would have maybe she only loves my sister. I'm not sure.
Did you have
But,
have you counted how many cuddles you've both had and
well,
had that comparison?
so the cold mother theory isn't something that is just been made up by misogynistic people. What they would have been observing is that those parents' interactions with their autistic children were different from their interactions with their non autistic children. And so, one of the things I found out at diagnosis, because I have known in my mind that I'm autistic from when I was 11. And I read a Woman's Own magazine that described autism. And I thought, oh, that's what's wrong with me. But I was only formally diagnosed at 36. And I was diagnosed after a considerable chunk of career working in special schools, working as a foster carer, working with autistic people. So when I went for diagnosis, I thought, I know what autism is, and these people are going to tell me that I'm autistic. And then there was a whole load of stuff in my diagnostic report that I didn't know anything about. And one of the things that I learned at diagnosis was that when I was a baby, I would go stiff if my mum tried to cuddle me. And so she would have cuddled me less than she cuddled my sister, because my sister would have enjoyed being cuddled. And it's not because she's a cold mother, it's because she's respecting me as a human. And so that original cold mother theory may have come about by people watching interactions like that.
And it's misunderstanding causation and correlation.
Yes, as a classic, isn't it?
Very big.
But it's one we see now. It's one you see now massively. How many parents of autistic children have been asked to go on parenting courses?
My
That
my sister got asked to go on a parenting course, and she went on this course, and all the other parents on that course, their children were all doing drugs and alcohol abuse. And she's literally going, "Why am I here?" They're like, we're all going, "Why are you here?" It's like, "'Cause my son's autistic." And everyone's like, "Why are you here?" It's because apparently I'm a bad parent.
there are places where you're not allowed to go for diagnosis until you've been on a parenting course first. So we are very much, and that is this country. And if we're the leaders of this, then we're really, it's not looking good, is it? But yeah, we are very much still telling the story that it is the parents' fault, that it is something that you're doing. Because if you're viewing autism as a consequence of inadequate parenting, then the problem that you're dealing with is inside the parent. And the solution for that problem is to fix the parent. When are you thinking it's a disease? You're looking for a cure, you're looking for drugs, you're looking for medical intervention. But if this is just shoddy parenting, it's woke, liberal, wet eyed, do good helicopter, all the terrible ways we parent, then you need to fix the parents. They need to go on training. They need to, learn to do better. It's a really popular story. It is amazing how many families I've met of autistic children who have been approached by strangers in supermarkets and told to hit their children.
Although I'm not right on camera at the moment, my face just dropped.
Like literally, I remember the first time I was told the story. I was I'd done a training day for a special school in Wales, and then really nice of them. They had kept me on in the evening, and they'd invited all their parents to come in and to have like a twilight session with me in the evening. And I can't remember what content I was delivering, but this one lady said to me, she said, I was in the supermarket with our daughter, and she said, and she wasn't even acting up. She wasn't having a meltdown. She was just happy, just kind of flapping happy. And a stranger came up to me and said, you should sort that out. And she said, oh, my daughter's quite happy, and, she's not causing any fuss. And he said, no, you need to deal with that. And she said, that's because she's autistic. And he said, well, she wouldn't be if you showed him the back of your hand more often. And like you, my face was just, you mean that somebody you don't know just came up to you and suggested that you've not been hitting your child enough. And the next time I did a training day with parents, I told that story because I thought they would be as shocked as I was. And a couple of them went, oh yeah, me too, type of thing. And you could totally do a me too. I think every time I've repeated that story to parents, there's been somebody in the room who has been approached by a stranger, usually in supermarkets, sometimes on trains, and told that if you just hit your child more, they wouldn't be autistic.
Problem is, we're talking about the first lot is it's a disease. Now we're on bad parenting, and often those two are joined. You hear someone talking about it's a disease. It's a bad parent's fault, and you're going, okay, so is it a disease or is it the parent? And I always find that, again, as I kind of read this book, think about it, it's like it's using emotional language. It's pulling at strings they know people will latch onto. So you're saying the word disease, saying the word it's the mother's fault. There are things in America which I think people will pull on those strings and go, yes, women should be at home. And I'm not being clear, I do not agree.
Well,
Very, very clear. I'm not saying that. But I think in America, there is this big movement around the traditional 1950s family: husband work, mum stays at home, looks after children, everything's perfectly happy.
yeah, it would be nice to separate us from that so clearly. But I think we hear that version, that's a different story, isn't it? The story you're telling there is, wouldn't it be great if it was like the old days? And that's the story that we're constantly telling in education. Like if we just went back to when they sat still and looked at the front, then it would all be better. And I think we tell the same story here. We just maybe a bit subtler about it. I remember when My Mummy is Autistic was published, some film crews came to the garden because it was published during lockdown, and they interviewed my son, and one of them asked him, do you suffer from having a mummy who's autistic? And you think, goodness, am I doing something? It's so easy to make a parent think that they're doing something wrong because every parent is constantly thinking that they're doing something wrong. So it's a really easy story to latch onto, that if you had just done differently. And I meet parents who say, I wish I'd known. If I'd known, I would have parented differently. And so there's a huge amount of parent blaming and parent guilt and all of that thing. And people encounter this story in institutions that mandate that you go on a parent training course before you can have a diagnosis for your child. But people meet it an awful lot within their own families, as well as from strangers in the supermarket, that I had the most depressing train ride recently where, well, originally it was good. I like it when I'm on trains and you get like an interesting group to eavesdrop on, because it's like having background radio whilst you're working. And this
But
group,
also one you haven't seen before. So you have no idea
yeah,
what's going to happen.
you could theoretically interact with it. It's like being in the television. This group of women got on and they were all, silver haired, looking very glamorous. And they'd got 4 bottles of Prosecco with them at 11 o'clock in the morning. And they were like, right, girls, shall we start now? And they were going on holiday without their husbands. They were on the train to have a good time. And I thought, these people are going to be great to spend the next 3 hours with because they're clearly going to get progressively more drunk. They were telling all these stories about their husbands and it was great. And then one lady said that her grandchild was autistic and it was causing real problems in the family because her daughter-in-law wasn't dealing with it correctly. And the other women all said, oh, that's terrible. That's really bad. We're so sorry to hear that. And the problem with this daughter-in-law was that she'd used to have a very high-flying career. But since the daughter had been born, she didn't seem to go out to work anymore because her granddaughter couldn't manage to go to school. Her granddaughter couldn't manage to eat food. Her granddaughter couldn't manage to even have socks on. And if her daughter-in-law was just a bit stricter with her granddaughter, then she would put her socks on and she would eat her dinner and she would go to school and her daughter-in-law would go back to having a very successful and glamorous job that much was said about how fantastic the job was. I think the job was and it began causing problems between her daughter-in-law and her son. And she didn't think that her son should have to deal with somebody like her daughter-in-law because her daughter-in-law was causing all these problems. And you listen and it was so bleak because what you could hear through what she was saying was that there was a very, very stressed child and there was an entirely unsupported mother who had given up her career and everything to try and support the child, but had absolutely no grab holds to reach for. And I sat there, I'm here doing a podcast about this thinking I should speak up. I should say, and I didn't know what I could possibly say to 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 change that narrative. And then a week or so later, I was doing a booking for a parent carers group. And you have this big group of parent carers, and I'm talking about the stories that you tell about autism or the sensory struggles people have with eating or some of the other topics that we're going to be talking about. And there was a person at the group who I've not seen before. I regularly do bookings for this particular parent carers group, and there was a new person. And so I went and spoke to them at the tea break and said, hi, who are you? And she said, oh, I'm not here on behalf of my child. I'm here on behalf of my granddaughter, really. My granddaughter was diagnosed as autistic last month, and I just want to find out as much as I can so that I know how to support my daughter-in-law. And I was so glad to see her. And I said, you don't realize what you're doing. And she's come to loads of them. And every time I see her, she said, I've got the time because I don't have to go to work. So I can come on lots of these. And it's really interesting what you say. And I want to be able to support my daughter-in-law as best I can. And it's just beautiful.
We're both going to be at the Autism and ADHD shows later this year.
We are.
And that's one of the things I love about going to those shows. You meet autistic individuals, you meet families trying to get that support. And then you often meet some old people and you're like, why are you here? Some of them are going, I've just been diagnosed at 67.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are, my grandchildren have been diagnosed and I'm learning lots. I'm now realizing my son might be.
Oh, how lovely.
And then they go, and I've really mucked up. And I was like, I'm going, no, the fact you're here is the best bit ever. And I love, and I always love leaving those shows with such a sense of hope that it's not, as you said, that isolated parent fighting their child. Because as you learn them, there is quite a bit of fighting as you learn and work out that, but fighting everyone else.
Yeah.
And going to these shows and meeting people who are actually going, yeah, my grandson's different. They need that support. What can I do? And I love it.
Yeah, we live in a little bubble though, don't we?
We do.
Because that's the thing. At those shows, that's who you meet. On the train, it's very different.
But it just goes, I think, as you said, with these stories we tell, the lady on the train, that would probably be a 5-hour talk with them because they believe that story so strongly.
Everyone around her was convinced that she was right, and they were all telling her what a good job she was doing. She said things like, I go around sometimes planning on holding my tongue and just doing what I can to support her, but then I just can't. When I see they went out the other day and she didn't even have a raincoat on, and you have to put a raincoat on, children. And I'm like, there is the adult who doesn't wear a raincoat when it rains, who doesn't wear my shoes, who only eats, the particular food. And there are so many other stories that you can tell. I psyched myself up. I was going to give her my business card right at the end, just before I got off the train. I was going to go, by the way, I've got some free training about autism that you can, hear. And I didn't manage. I didn't manage to. Maybe she'll hear. Maybe she'll hear the podcast. You don't know the things you don't know. She wasn't. Her start point was that she wanted to help, but she just wasn't willing to do any learning or any listening. She just wanted what she already knew to be right, and she was willing to help from that start point.
My mum always used to say to me, "When are you going to grow up?" And I'm literally looking at her going, I'm never going to grow up. But it was the fact I'm running a company, I'm paying bills. I've got 2 daughters who seem to be thinking I'm doing a great job. I'm doing all of these things. What do you mean by growing up?
Well, so maybe there is a particular thing in mind that isn't what you mean by growing up.
I think it means boring and serious with no interests.
Maybe, yeah.
I think that's what you're supposed to be as a grown-up, apparently.
But stories-wise, it's a disease that radiates suffering on people around us, and it needs to be cured. It's bad parenting, and these parents need to sort themselves out. And if you are experiencing that bad parenting story, that really isolates that family. That child, my train story child, is so on their own because they're being supported by one person who is also massively isolated. And it blocks any curiosity that people might have towards that child, because all the time the grandma was thinking that it was the mother's fault. She's not in any way thinking about what the child is experiencing. So in both of those stories, the autistic person is missing, because in the first one, they've been stolen by a disease. And in the second one, they're kind of disregarded because the focus is on the parents. The third story that we tell very much has them in it, because the third story is that autism is a form of behaviour. It's one you'll know. If you are thinking that it is something that a child is doing rather than being, then you would think to correct it by changing what they're doing. And you would use things like rewards and punishments. You would have star charts and rainbows and clouds. And there's any number of, you can probably tell me.
There's lots of things where you just think we'll punish it out of them or reward it out of them.
Yeah.
And again, it's that idea that the behavior is a choice. Yes. There's something causing that behavior.
Yeah.
Yes. Or and again, I'm using the term negative, positive behavior, but that's a social construct.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing this, why is that positive or negative? That's interpreted. So sometimes it is, again, a complicated, whole other probably podcast, but a behavior they might not see as being naughty. Mm-hmm. It's just they're just doing their thing, but it's just not what you want. And then there is the disruptive behavior and the naughty, which they're definitely doing things wrong just to annoy you, apparently.
For attention.
And it's always assumed that it's a choice, isn't it?
Yeah. So the behavior story is probably the biggest told story. And it's understandable how it comes about, because when other people experience somebody's autism, they experience it through that person's behavior. So they don't get to be that person. So when you're witnessing what you, from the outside, view as autism, you witness behavior. And when you are diagnosed in accordance with patterns of behavior. That is how the diagnosis happens. So when you're looking at stuff that supports diagnosis, or stuff that's saying, is your child autistic? Are you autistic? What you're reading are descriptions of behavior. So it makes total sense that you would think it's a behavior, because everything that you encounter that describes it describes behavior. So it's a behavior. And it's almost okay, because it is experience, those behaviors are real. We're not making up a disease like we were in the first story, but it's just missing the fundamental point. And that missing of the point in the foundations of this story leads to such different consequences further down the line. And I think I did it with you on a podcast before, but my best example of this is a child I met who was trashing the living room at home. He was smashing up all the pictures on the wall in the living room at home. And they were also trashing the display boards at school. And the parent said they'd tried everything just to keep the pictures, like he's breaking the pictures of Granny's third cousin and the new baby that Auntie Sue's had and all of this. And at school, they had also tried everything. They'd tried putting his own pictures up on the wall. They tried taking away his playtimes if he took the stuff off the wall. They had tried everything. And the mum said, and listed all these things, they've tried everything. And by everything, they meant all of the carrots and all of the sticks. Because if you're viewing it as behavior, that's what you go for. You go for consequence or you go for reinforcement because it's a behavior. You go for carrots and sticks. You take their iPad off them. You promise them a sticker. You whatever it is, carrots and sticks. They tried everything, which is essentially just one strategy. We've tried behaviorism. It hasn't worked. He's still ripping the things off the wall. If you see it as a behavior, you see that behavior and you think he's not showing respect. He needs to learn respect. He needs consequences. He needs discipline. And you view it and you kind of, there's a feeling to how you view it. It's kind of like a righteous indignation. Like, how dare he, the disrespectful little child? Like, it's quite a tough feeling. Like, I'm going to make him show some respect. If you don't view it as a behavior, if you view it as a neurotype, then you go, hang on a minute. This is the same at home and at school. Like, what about being him is causing him to pull down wall displays in both these places? And then you get a bit curious and then you learn, if you dig in the right places, that a lot of autistic people have hypervisual processing. It's like you see in more detail than other people. Chris Packham talks about how he uses this hypervisual processing to identify the little wing details on birds far away or leaves or things like that. It's a common autistic experience. Not all autistic people, but it's a common one. And your vision is a third of your cerebral cortex. It's a huge amount of the space in your brain. Your brain burns something like 90% of the calories you eat in a day. Don't quote me on that. But like if you think you could get thin just by thinking really hard, and your vision is a significant chunk of that, seeing stuff is tiring. And autistic people, not all autistic people, are seeing more. And people who've ever done, if you've ever been like on a weekend break where you wander around a city and look at architecture or go around a museum, you get to the end of one of those days and you collapse on the hotel bed and you go, oh, I'm knackered. I must have walked miles. But if you step counted it against a day at school or a day picking the kids up from school and running around, step count, what you were wandering. You weren't sprinting place. You were ambling about. You have not walked miles. You're knackered from seeing because you had to do all that new seeing and it's exhausting. When you're slumped on the hotel bed, you don't want to read the book that you bought thinking that you would read on holiday because you can't be bothered because you're knackered. And you would like the children to just shut up and watch the television quietly. And you can't be dealing with the kind of social interaction of family and because you're exhausted. And that child was exhausted in his school setting and in his home setting. And he was trying to make it a bit easier to occupy. But whilst you see it as a behavior, he's being naughty and defiant and needs consequences. When you see it as resulting from a neurotype, your feeling in response to it is very different. Your feeling is curiosity and compassion. Like when that mum understood, she was like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry I put him in a space where he felt that stressed. You know, what can I do? Really simple. What we did, we just kept one wall of their living room blank and then he can just sit facing that wall and it's less visual pressure. But
I always find that idea of just seeing a behavior completely on its own with nothing else taken in, I find really weird. The idea of not thinking, like if your friend hit you when you were young, you'd be like, why did he hit me? What have I done? Have I done something?
yeah,
Did I deserve it? You ask why.
yeah,
As a child, if your friend doesn't call you, you're like, have I upset her? Have I done something to annoy her? Yet when it's a child doing something like that, the questions don't seem to get asked. We seem to see that behavior is perfectly just, it's the cause, there's nothing before that. And it's we don't see the, as you said, the environment you're in, the situation you're in, as part of the recipe that that child's following. Or you're literally going, everything's perfect, he just doesn't like it, he's wrong.
Yeah.
And there's so many sights, smell, sound, there's so many factors. And I just find it odd that people don't find that, oh, what do they have in common?
Or we use really short answers, like we say it's attention seeking and just stop there. Or they're doing it on purpose and stop there. Because, like, yes, it could well be attention seeking, because if you're trying to communicate something to somebody, you need to get their attention, but you don't stop needing that until they've listened to what you're communicating. Or
And he would definitely did do that on purpose because he wanted a blank wall.
yeah, he was intentional. He couldn't have said to you that's what he was doing. He was just responding to how stressed he felt, and that was having a consequence.
That last bit you just said there, he can't tell you why. And that's the thing, sometimes they don't know why. They can't, with young children or anyone, you can't always explain why you did something.
Yeah.
I went to the TS show last year and got a migraine. I'm going, why? I've done this show for years. I've got a migraine. Why? Okay, I've drunk lots. I had all my stuff. Now, as I kind of analysed it, I went, actually, although I'm in the same venue, my journey getting here was completely different to my normal one, and my journey home, normally I stay up in a hotel, so there were lots of differences, and it was just visually everything sensory draining, which gave me my migraine. But I just had to sit there and go, I spend 2 days here every year for 15, 20 years. Why is it today that I'm getting a migraine?
But it's that curiosity, isn't it? That going back and looking why. Because the other thing that will happen is, because autism is described as a behavior, when you meet behavior, you just answer it with, well, it's because autism. And the autism becomes the answer, and it blocks the curiosity. And I think that progress is made by being curious and compassionate, which is an easy thing to say and a hard thing to do. And when they're a bit older, you can interview my children and see how well I did. But like, I remember being shown around. I was doing some work for an adult care agency, and I was going to be training their staff. And like a lot of places do, they said, would you like to come and look around, come and meet all our, and it's great for me. I don't really learn very much going around a setting before. Like, if you walk around a school and get shown into all of the classrooms, you don't really learn a lot about what's going on, just having a little tour like that. But it's fun for being nosy. And like, if you walk in and something exciting is happening, and then it's fun. So I do, if I can. Quite often I'm not able to, because I don't have the time. But this place, we were walking around and the manager was telling me about all their different provisions, and we were meeting the different residents who lived in that setting. And we walked into one room, and there was a young lad, probably mid to late 20s, banging his head repeatedly against a wall. And he was making a kind of back of the throat, just sort of distressed noise. And as we walked in, I said to the person that was showing me around, I said, oh, if you need to go and like say hi to him, I'm fine to just stand here. Because I didn't want her to think that because she was looking after a guest, she couldn't attend to something that's clearly a priority over showing me around. And I was also trying to make out, like, I understood that this is a kind of thing that happens. I'm not going to think less of your setting because somebody's got upset. And I said, I can't remember how I phrased it, but I went, you can go and talk to him if you need to. And she said, oh no, that's, I mustn't say his name on air. That's, so and so. He does that because he's autistic. And that was it. And that was the answer. It's a behavior, and it's behavior because autism is a behavior. And we weren't going any further than that. And he was distressed. And in a way, she's right. The reason that he's banging in his head is because he's autistic. If he wasn't autistic, he might have other ways that would have been able to express what he was expressing. But to say that he wasn't expressing it, he was very, very clearly expressing something, but there was no curiosity as to what.
But also, it's fine. Yes, he's doing that because he's autistic. He might be processing something differently. He might
Yeah.
be struggling. All of that correct. That is because he's autistic. But if you change a few little things, that behavior may stop. And again, it's that medical social model.
Yeah.
Yes, he's autistic, so he will just do weird stuff all day long because he's autistic, no matter what we do. Or actually, depending on the environment, Joe might be comfy, Joe might not be comfy. I might be comfy, I might not be comfy. It depends on the environment and what we're doing.
Mm.
And that, I think we need, I wish people would understand so much more.
It's a place to jump to a more complicated story, which is one I am seeing increasingly told. Let's be careful. You remember the vaccine story?
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous, fabulous piece of work published in The Lancet. Clearly disputed, disproven multiple times over. We very much know that vaccines do not cause autism. There is very, very good science that shows that this is the case. There was no good science ever that showed that they did. There was just one very dubious soul who published that, and it was published in The Lancet. And The Lancet last year, early this year, published a paper by a group of academics who were petitioning to have a designation of profound autism separate to autistics like you and me, Dale, the kind of lifestyle autistics. The like
I did not realize I was a lifestyle
we're
autistic.
just
Oh, I sound
it's
so
like
fashionable right
it's a
now.
fashion trend. You're just choosing it because us lifestyle autistics are taking airtime right now. It's what we're doing. We're taking airtime away from the real autistics, those with profound autism. And when they refer to profound autism, it is a with situation. So you and I would probably say, I am autistic, but these are people with profound autism because we're back to a disease narrative. These are people who are
Dehuman again.
really suffering. These are people who don't count. And the move is being made by a group of academics who, one could say that the move is being made by a group of academics who wish to preserve their careers, and their careers have been made off the back of pathologizing autistic people. And there are academics on record as saying that they object to the new autistic academics coming through and taking their jobs because they have been doing this work for decades. And these young upstarts are coming along and occupying spaces in academia that should rightfully be theirs because they've been doing it for longer. And the move to separate off a part of the spectrum, it's ironic because some of the same people are on record as saying we should remove the Asperger's diagnosis because we shouldn't have a separate part of the spectrum. We should recognize the unity of the autistic spectrum. But at this end, we should have this separate group. And it's a popular narrative at first glance because people who support people with very high support needs say, yes, we need this population to be protected. We need them to be identified separately from that other population because they need the money first. They need the support first. They need the funds first. And I don't think you would find anybody disagreeing with that. So one of the arguments they say is we have no way of describing this population of people. And the autistic community are like, hello? We do actually, because we refer to people who have very high support needs. That's who they're talking about. And people like you and me would be people with low support needs. Although there are people in both our lives that would heckle that,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
people who
Yeah.
have to deal with you during your migraine. But the danger in that separation, in saying that these are different types of things, that these are almost categorically different, is that it is a move that silences voices like ours in spaces like this in relation to people with very high support needs. And when I walked in and saw the man banging his head against the wall, my first thought is, what would have had to happen to me for me to be doing that? Because I know that that could be me. I am not separate from him. I was at a conference last month and there was a presentation from people who had been working with people under section, and the people who were under section. So these are people who've been put away for losing their marbles. They had been under section for more than 10 years. And they had interviews with these people. And one of these people was me. He said the things I would say. He thought the things I would think. But at some point 10 years ago, when he'd been distressed, somebody had had him sectioned, and then he's been medicated, he's been institutionalized. And I can look to so many points in my life where if you'd come across me, I would have been very distressed. I would have not been able to speak. I would have been acting in ways that are self-injurious. And if you loved and cared for me, you would quite rightly have thought that putting me under section would be better for me. It's just once they'd done that, they couldn't get him back. And we meet the families whose children have been admitted places and they can't get them back. And the idea that I am so different from somebody with high support needs is really dangerous, because the people who potentially have the most insight, if you're supporting somebody who is smashing their head into concrete, who is, biting themselves, who is refusing to eat, who is massively, massively stressed, it's likely to be another autistic person who has a kind of gut instinct as to what's going on. And separating the spectrum, you know, it's you end up sounding like a conspiracy theorist, don't you? But if you were somebody who was trying to protect a pot of money, the best way that you could protect a pot of money from a group of people would be to create divisions amongst them. Go, not that sort of, those autistics are taking your money away. Those teachers are doing harm to your children. It's the parents' fault. All of those arguments between the people who are actually on the same side stop us from looking around and going, hang on a minute, this is a sort of structural thing here.
So in the Neurotribes book, you talked about, was it Kramer? Canner.
Yeah.
And then later on, there was somebody who did research. I can't remember the name, but he was in the Navy.
Are you thinking of Asperger's?
No. It's a bloke who did pulled data together and might have even started one of these organizations. He's talked about it in the book, but he does lots of talking. He goes out and talks to lots of people. And when you kind of look at the way it's described in the book, him and Craner, it's about keeping themselves on top of the pile. It's narcissistic. I want to be loved. I want to be on top of a pile. And again, same way when they talk about splitting the autism into different cohorts, they want to be the top of the pile. They're that person feeding, oh, someone's taking something away from you. It's that I just see lots of things like that. It's not about the person. It's not about that person with autism or the autistic person being supported. It's about, I want to go and tour the world talking about this topic because that's what I enjoy doing. And this is a group of people I can make believe what I said.
Yeah. You'd kind of hope not, wouldn't you? I remember because I didn't used to tell people I was autistic, and we were talking before we came on air about when and whether we kind of confess being autistic to people that we work with. I didn't used to tell people I was autistic. And then my son became the UK's youngest published author with his book, My Mummy is Autistic. And I became the UK's most obnoxiously proud mummy. And I want to go around telling everybody that I'm the mummy. And so he kind of professionally outed me. And then people were saying, like, when are you going to write your book, Joe? And one of the things that I was worried about, because most of my working life has been working with autistic people who have very high support needs, who don't have access to language, who don't have access to standardized forms of communication, who absolutely need the understanding and the support first, ahead of the queue type of thing. I don't want me talking about my experience to take away from their experience. But anytime I've done it, I have had messages from parents who say things like, what you said, I think that's happening for my child, but they can't say it. And the parents of the people with high support needs hear in the stories that I tell expressions of the experience of their loved ones. And that's the thing. Autism is an incredibly diverse spectrum, but it is a unified thing. There is great variation within the experience, but it's not so great that it's different types of thing. Like if you are autistic and we are autistic, and that we encompasses people with profound support needs and people with learning disabilities and things like that as well.
So one thing, and I'm trying to work out, is the middle one at the bottom is
Oh,
is that why is there more
hang
autistic
on a
people,
minute. We've got my little postcard because
which will be shared
when
with the show notes?
when I do this training day with parents, this is bits of a training day that you're hearing here. I want to give them something that they can go away and point at people. So we've got autism is a disease, autism is a problem with parenting, autism is a behavior that the child is producing. And then I've got autism is a betweenness. And I really like the betweenness one. If I was picking a story to tell, I would tell the betweenness story because autism, and that's not a story. I can evidence this one. So the scientists that study autistic people have identified around 100 genes that are associated with being autistic. They are all old genes. And the significance of them being old genes is that it shows that those genes have survived in our population because they have survival value. So you can have conditions that are a result of gene duplication, deletion, a corruption of the genetic code. It's totally fine to be those things. Many of my friends are those things. But the significance of the autistic and ADHD genes being old genes is it shows there's a reason for it historically. And it makes sense, doesn't it, that when we were living in caves, you need a group that are good at making friends with the people in the cave next door because we're puny two-legged things with small teeth and we need to get together in big groups. So it's very useful to have the neurotypicals out there. You also need a chap at the back of the cave who's focused on inventing the wheel because then we can roll away from the four-legged things more quickly. And you need, Dave, who's really interested in the party and the wheel and the twig snapping outside the cave because he keeps us safe. And there's new work on ADHD where people are theorizing that they were the hunters, that they were the people who were particularly good at, like noticing there's an animal in that bush type of thing, that was the value to society. And what's happening now is that it is an epigenetic condition. So I hope I feel like I'm breaking the news early. America, if you're listening, we've got the news here before September. It's an epigenetic condition, which means it's a consequence of the genes in the environment that they're in. And so it happens in a betweenness. It's the genetics that you have in the space that you occupy. And so I make a joke that I lived in Germany for 2 years and I am less autistic in Germany than I am here. And obviously my genes don't change as I get off the plane, but it's that experience of who you are in the setting that you're in. So when I'm talking to people in England, quite often there is hidden nuance and conversation that I don't necessarily pick up on. Like, oh, yes, you must come round. We'd love to see you and your children again. And in Germany, there's a lot less of it. People will say, please come to get dinner again, but leave your children at home next time or something like that. And it's so relaxing. It's like, I am bored of this conversation now. Should we change the topic? You're like, yes, thanks for telling me.
I wanted to do a podcast called Swedish or Autistic for that exact same thing.
Yes.
So I read this thing about what it's like living in Sweden. I was like, this is like an autistic heaven.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
looked into diagnosis rates, and it's the same. But actually, I reckon your life as an autistic person would be easier
That's it.
in Scandinavia and Germany and Austria. It's just quite a bit more blunt.
Yeah, just more direct, less hidden meaning.
Less small chat.
So I'm less autistic because the experience of being autistic is a betweenness. It's between me and the social environment. It's between me and the sensory environment. And the scientists that are looking at identifying autism earlier, because we all know that the sooner you know whether you're autistic or not, the better your long-term outcomes. People are looking at how could we identify it in babies, the biggest markers of autism in young people, very young people, is their response to the sensory world around them. And so it's very much, like the plant flourishing analogy. Like if you put a plant on the windowsill and it wilts and doesn't flourish, you don't blame the plant. You don't give the plant consequences. You don't lure the plant. Like if you be a good plant, you move it to a different windowsill or you put it in the greenhouse. And that's the experience of disability that occurs within autism. And some people would say that's easy for us lifestyle autistics to say, because for us, it might be that if we change the blinds, if we change the background noise, if we don't wear our shoes, then we're fine and we can function. But for those who are, really autistic, the proper ones, it's much more serious. And actually, I think it's just much more layered. You quite often find that if you are one of those people Like my shoes thing, I very rarely wear my shoes because I can talk about not wanting to wear my shoes, because I can put it on a contract to not wear my shoes. I very rarely have to wear my shoes. But if I was somebody who had less capacity, I would be much more likely to have worn my shoes more often, to be forced to wear my shoes, to be wearing shoes that I find different. You could do a test. You could just put me in horrible shoes for a day and see how autistic I appear at the end of it. It'll be a whole lot more autistic than I appear now.
I think I came to your in Southampton. You had a day
Yes.
where you kind of presenting your research,
Yeah, that
and
was
I walked in the room
fabulous.
and you looked at me and went, "Dale, you've got a shirt on," which was quite shocking to the lady behind me who thought I
Oh
normally
no!
see me
Oh, I've only
topless.
just realised. Oh, I didn't realise. Yeah, I've just realised as you said it. I'd like the listeners to know that I've never seen Dale topless.
Yep. But the thing is, I don't like wearing shirts. I always put them on a podcast. It's a
Yeah,
certain
you look
level of
very smart,
expectation.
Dale. I've got my shoes on. We're doing
And
well.
when you came and recorded in the studio, I was for the Sencast sessions. I'm always in a white shirt. That shirt gets put on about 2 minutes before we start recording and lasts about 2 minutes after. Then I'm back in one of my Star Wars t-shirts or some other t-shirt because I'm comfy.
Yeah.
And I completely get that. And I shaped my life in lots of different ways without realizing it, in what makes me comfy, how I like to do things. And it's not oh, you're just fussy.
No.
I've learned I work better, I achieve more, I am happier, which
Yeah.
means I can support my children better.
Yeah. It has that, the railway track analogy where you start on two different paths and they're really close together, but then they end up really far apart. That being able to make those adjustments, like me not wearing my shoes, my capacity not wearing my shoes increases markedly from not wearing my shoes. I am dramatically better just from not wearing my shoes, from not having a phone number on my business cards, from never giving out a phone number professionally. I am much more capable professional. When I run the sensory projects and I work for myself, I can be extremely capable as a professional. But my recent experience doing the PhD, I was employed to do the PhD. So I was a part of somebody else's organization and I have to conform to the structures that organization I have to operate within. And I was really, really well supported by a group of people who understood that that's not necessarily going to be straightforward for me to do. But the reduction in my capacity was so shocking to me because I am used to being a capable person now. And it goes away so quickly. Like one of the hardest things I did for my PhD was buy a train ticket through the university systems. It nearly broke me. I buy train tickets all the time at the sensory projects, but it's so quick. I can see that it would be so easy for me to have been somebody who didn't ever manage to work for themselves, because this is just a fluke that I run the sensory projects, who had to stay in a organization that's run by other people. And when I was in organizations run by other people, I used to get ill a lot. Like with proper, have to go to the doctors and take drugs and be signed off. If I'd gone further down that way, I could easily be that sectioned person, that depressed person, and it's that same split that's happening, I think, for people with very high support needs, is that once you put something like that, once you put shoes on, or once you're forced to occupy this environment, you get dramatically worse. And when you meet people who are like, I get called in because a school will be like, we don't know what to do with Tim, or we don't know how to support Akil. Can you come and look? And you look at the immediate, like, okay, this room is too noisy. That light's probably too bright for him. We can probably calm him down a bit by making these adjustments. But then you're kind of left thinking, how many layers of this stuff have you already lived through, and how much trauma is mangling your experience? And those pathways split. I think people on the spectrum are surprisingly similar to one another.
Well, I think you talked about being a lifestyle autistic.
Yes.
I personally feel I am an imposter autistic.
Trendy autistic.
Because I would say I'm not hugely impacted. But then I reflect.
You work for yourself.
I work for myself.
You create the work environment. Yeah.
Exactly. And that is a really big thing that I sometimes really do not appreciate, that everyone when I was going through my diagnosis, it's like, do you put things off you don't want to do? It's like, no, I delegated it already.
I have people who do those things
Yes,
for me.
everything I hate doing, there's now a team to do that for me. I just end up doing the stuff I love. So, and I literally went, and it is that realization. There was a period of time a couple of years ago where I ended up looking for jobs, and it was a really stressful time. So I'm literally going, I've got to go and work in an office with people. I've got to do things in their order, in their process. When I see something is really obviously wrong, I'm either got to keep my mouth shut because it's not my role, or I've got to basically choose to pick a fight, knowing I'm right, but I'll still probably lose it because and I literally, it was a really hard time. And that reflection on, actually, I'm not highly impacted because I've customized my entire life to suit me in every aspect. Noise cancelling headphones, best thing ever. And it's realizing that actually, I don't want to know what I would be like if I was just working in IT in a company in London. I would be a very different person.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be more autistic.
No.
I would be exactly the same amount of autistic.
But the betweenness would have changed.
All that environment has changed.
Yeah.
Everything about my life, I'd have less control, less certainty. Everything would be different.
It's one of the reasons I work so hard at the sensory projects, is because this is how I can be me. And when I was doing the PhD, there was a point at the PhD where things went very badly wrong and I got very ill. And I think I actually was up here recording just before some, exciting tests that I was having done. There was 3 months where people thought I had all sorts of extraordinary cancers because I managed to get so ill from working in situations that I'm not equipped to work within. And at that point, I was thinking, I can't do this anymore. And I lost all my confidence to, because I wasn't managing to do it. So why should I be somebody that people listen to? And why would you talk to me on a podcast? And I still basically think that. But so I was looking for jobs, and I can't do any of the jobs. I often look at supermarkets because when I am stressed, I walk around supermarkets as a decompression. And I know that a lot of autistic people find supermarkets very overwhelming, but I like the homogeny of the environment, that it's all the same amount of light, that it's all the same amount of background noise. I really like people. And it's a space where you can be with loads of people and none of them will speak to you. So I just walk up and down the aisles of supermarkets as a coping with stress. It's like going to a spa for me. I thought, oh, maybe I could work at a supermarket, and then I could just live in this space. Like I would really, it's aspirational to me to work at just like a big Asda or a big Tesco's. And my husband said to me, I don't think you would manage the social structure of the staff. And you think, oh yeah, I only see the front end of working at a supermarket, don't I? I don't see that you have team meetings or nights out or bonding or
Get a job at IKEA. The hierarchy isn't really there.
yeah, there isn't an IKEA anywhere near where I live because
No,
I
it's
live
quite
out in the
away.
wilds. But
Yeah.
maybe one day you'll come into IKEA and I will be there in my uniform and be super proud.
I learned, it's one of the things I look back at my time and I reflect on it going, actually, there was a lot which was really friendly for me. It was really supportive environment. The hierarchy that I was used to in school wasn't there. There were so many nice things. I also worked in a bit, there was no customers. So that was really good.
Oh, I like the look of shelf stacking at night in a supermarket as well. But I'm no good without sleep.
Like when you go to Argos or IKEA and your stuff comes out on a trolley, or you go, who's ordered that? I used to be one of those people who used to get that. So it'd be a big warehouse, everything organized. And I would basically put in charge of efficiency because I always could see a better way. I loved it.
Excellent.
But before we go, one thing I do want to touch on, and I think we might even do a podcast on this. And to me, it's a quick, short answer.
Okay. Noted.
Why are there more autistic people now?
Oh, that's one of the other stories. Oh, so many of us, they just keep coming out of the woodwork. It's because it's a disease and it's spreading. It's because parents are just getting worse and worse at parenting and they're infecting each other with their woke ideas. It's because children are naughty and people aren't hitting them enough. If you just hit your children more, then there wouldn't be all these naughty children around behaving autistic.
Should we go for the real answer?
Yeah, okay, real answer. Real answer is really nice if you had the graphs. If you look at the graph of left-handedness through time, it's one of these graphs where there's kind of none, and then there's a steady rise, and then it plateaus at the top. So in the days before we cared what hand you wrote with, nobody knew how many people were left-handed. There's a brief dip in that graph at the time when kind of formal schooling starts and you get beaten with sticks for being left-handed. So there's a drop in left-handedness. And then there's a few left-handed people, the people who, even when you hit them with sticks, still write with the wrong hand. And then we stop hitting them with sticks so much, and there's more left-handed people. And then they're bloody everywhere. There's loads of left-handed people. And then it plateaus out, and there's like about the same amount of left-handed people all the time. If you look at the graph of gayness through time, homosexuality, we didn't used to bother about it. Then we got super religious, and there's none of them, none. And then we stopped, I don't know, flogging them, drowning them, all the things we would have done to them. And there's a few of them about, the odd Kenneth Williams appears on the telly. And then there's more of them. And then they're bloody everywhere. There's loads. This graph just really steeply shut. And then there's about the same number. And those graphs, you could almost plot the autism graph on top of them. Because what you've got is there's none of them. There was none of them about in my day. And then there's the odd one or two, the really obvious Kenneth Williams of the autism world. And then they go unchecked. And now we're about halfway up the climb. And at some point it will plateau out. If you genuinely think that we're spreading and that there is more of us, it's because we're having sex with each other. But I don't think that we're any more successful sexually than we ever were. Some people like a geek.
I was personally to go down to how the definition has changed. But I preferred your story much better.
Oh, no, you can do that.
So if we go back to like Canners.
Yeah.
His definition of autism, it had to be present and notable at birth.
Okay.
And it was a really kind of narrow.
He wouldn't like the vaccine theory then, would he?
No. So it had to be, if you didn't notice it at birth, It's not autism.
Okay. It's just bad parenting.
Just bad parenting. And then they basically, over time, and you can see if you go through DSM 2, 3, 4, and 5, that definition of autism. And also there was another definition they used to use, childhood psychosis or something.
Yeah, childhood schizophrenia as well.
Actually, if you look at that, just the history of them, you can completely understand why there are more diagnoses.
Yeah.
It's kind of, but also, if you're interested, go read Neurotribes, because the whole thing around Asperger is, I find really interesting, that the definition of Asperger is basically a bad translation of his research. And I found it fascinating. But the other bit I would just say is, if we think of autism and ADHD as social models, not medical, the environment we're in is non-stop. Like those wall pictures all covering the walls, and you couldn't get away from it. You cannot get away from social media, from TV. And where as an adult, this is bad for me, I can put it down. If as a child you don't understand how it's impacting you, it's hard to know to put it down. So I think technology in the world we're in isn't saying there are more autistic people, but I think that we are struggling with the world more than maybe we did 20 years ago. So there's more. I would say people are struggling more, I think, with the world the way it is.
Yeah. The definition one, I saw somebody explain that really clearly. They said, imagine that we had previously defined dog to be Labrador, and now we understood that dog is, dog. You'd have suddenly a whole load more dogs if you were previously only identifying Labradors. And I think we definitely were only identifying a subset of male autistics, but in the definitions that we used in the past. Whether we are struggling more, I'm not so sure about that one. But I think what we are is a generation that values or recognizes struggle more. So, for example, I really struggled at school, and my parents would have been aware that I was struggling, not completely aware because I wasn't very forthcoming with that, but they would have kept me at school because that's in my best interests. And that's genuine and that's loving. And they did what was in my best interests in as far as their understanding. We now don't necessarily keep our children at school because we understand that to stress a child out leads to emotional baggage that you don't want to be carrying around in later life. And so in our best interests, in our understanding of what is best interest now, we value emotions more highly than we used to. So we would recognize that stress. And in our modern, contemporary, more progressed understanding of mental health and things like that, those things count more. And so we are speaking that stress more. But I should imagine that the autistics of the 1950s weren't faring any better than us.
No, I did see a post on it. It was like, being autistic, when would you have liked to be born? And my response was, I've read Neurotribes, I've read that history. Right now is probably, in reality, the best time to be alive, or caveman.
Who's the chap that had a second staircase put into his Cavendish?
Cavendish.
Had a second staircase put into his house to avoid small talk with the servants. I feel like that might have been.
That was a really interesting. That whole bit about Cavendish was really interesting. He was so intelligent. He had somehow worked out the mass of the Earth using some things and vibrations centuries before someone else did it, in a way that isn't possible, but he did, and he was really accurate. He identified elements decades, centuries before anyone else, and it's all in his journals, but he just couldn't talk to people.
Yeah.
And they talk about how you
I
don't.
liked the tips that the other scientists gave each other, like, don't ask him a direct question because he'll run away. But if you stand near him and like listen, or if you stand near him and talk about something that he's interested in,
and then make a wrong statement, he'll come in and correct you and go. And it's just fascinating. It's like,
but that's a lovely adaptation from the people around him, because they're curious about him and they respect him and they're recognizing him and his value, which is not to say that you have value just because you know clever stuff. But the point is that if you value the person, then you don't dismiss them as a disease. You don't ignore them because you're blaming the parents. You don't, consider that their actions are just to get attention or to be naughty or because they're in some way. I remember a school I went to where a member of staff told me that the problem they were having was that some children were just evil. It's just because they're an evil child making these terrible decisions. If you recognize that this is a neurotype, this is an epigenetic condition, this is a valid way of being, then you approach people with curiosity and go, okay, why? Like you were saying, why are you behaving like this? And your background belief there is that there is a reason. It's a legitimate reason, and it would be the same. And if you're curious and you've not got the same neurotype, find somebody who has, because their guess at it is, likely to be more on the odds.
There are probably just people out there who are evil. But generally,
no, there are not people who are evil.
I'm talking like it's like 1 in a billion.
No.
1 in a billion, not 1 in 100 that there are loads of. But generally, every time you find someone doing something really horrible, you look back and there's reasons. I'm not saying I'm making excuses.
Exactly. There's a reason.
But someone being pure evil is like 1 in a billion. It's really rare.
We are going to agree to disagree. I do not think that evil people exist.
I think they do. Okay. But my point is, they are so rare.
They're rare. It's very unlikely that evil people are causing autism.
Yes. Or anytime you're in school, that child is not evil. If you've watched one with Damon, is it The Shining?
I have not watched
not The Shining.
Anything. I was just reading books.
One with Guildford Cathedral. Not The Exorcist either. Everyone's probably listening going, it's this one. I know which film it is. I just cannot think of the name. But it's a 70s film, and it is basically, he is the devil child.
Okay, I'll allow you fictional evil people.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally you're in that zone, not just a child choosing not to do that, or a child not to do that, or a child being, there's a reason. The same way, if you're in a relationship which isn't working, it's not because they're or any other rude word. There's a reason. Yeah, they're reacting to previous trauma. Yeah, they're reacting to something. Previous experiences has taught them something.
Yeah, it's just so much easier to consequence and reward, isn't it? Because the detective work that you would have to do to figure out all those reasons is massive. But that's why talking to parents is so important, because their instincts or their knowledge of what's happened to that person is normally really good. And I think if you are kind of in that state where you're going, what do we do? Like, how do we help this person? What's going on here? Being aware of these stories, They can seem really theoretical and kind of out of touch, but they're really useful as a litmus test for whether how you proceed is going to be useful. Because if you can hear, oh, hang on a minute, this is somebody telling a disease story, this is somebody telling a parenting story, this is somebody telling a behavior story, then you can go, I might not listen quite so hard to what they say next.
Yes.
And sometimes we get sold approaches, here's a solution. And it's so, when you desperately need a solution, it's so tempting to go and buy the solution or to sign up for the solution or to adopt the solution as a whole school policy. But if you spot that these stories are being told in those solutions, then there's cause to just pause. One of the biggest mistakes we're making in education now is the commitment to a belief that one environment suits all people. And it's not just autistic people that one's letting down. If we're going my epigenetic, the plant flourishing in different environments, we have different children. They would need different spaces. There isn't going to be, however great your systems are, they are never going to suit all children or adults.
I feel that when I was at primary school, when I was young, 10 years ago, was really black and white and everything.
Hemlock.
I felt my teacher had more opportunity, more capacity to make those slight changes for each of us.
I was going to say, if you were pre-1984, then they probably did.
Born pre-1984, didn't enter school till shortly after that.
The national curriculum comes in midway through our schooling,
Yes.
I think, because you're about the same age as me.
And yeah, I look back and going, no, my teacher actually kind of looked at us and worked out what we needed and kind of gave it to us. And when I sit there and I look at the world the way it is now, I just go, yeah, I get why no one, and I mean no one, not teachers, not the students, not the parents, no one's enjoying school right now.
No, they're really not.
And that's a bit that's got to change. Right. I know we could keep talking for ages. Yep. And I know that even when I hit the stop record button, we are going to keep talking for ages, and that's great. But others have probably been driving around in circles or done an extra couple of laps around the field with their dog just to get to the end of this. So I will wrap it up.
Okay.
So Jo has given me some information, as she always does. So I've got links to her books and it's all the stuff through the Sensory projects, and there's loads there, isn't there?
Yeah, I've got quite a lot of free content on YouTube, which would be my first signpost for people listening.
Interesting. That's not in my links. I will make sure that will be in there very shortly. So by the time you listen to this, it will already be there. And I'll also put an image of the postcard, which you've sent me digitally. So you'll see the postcard that Jo has been referring to.
Then you can name the stories, explain them, and ask for them to be shifted.
But I'm going to put a link to the Neurotribes because it was a hard read. There's a lot in there, and a lot of it was not happy reading. But it's worth going through all of that, I think, to understand.
It's a seminal piece of work.
So thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
You are very, very, very welcome. And as always, you'll find the show notes wherever you listen to the podcast or on the Sendcast website. If you listen to us at iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else where you can leave a review, please leave us a review, give us a 5 stars or whatever it is, and let others know all about the podcast. The Sendcast is created by us here at B Squared. And Steps for Life is one of our assessment frameworks within our assessment software, Connecting Steps. It covers functional academic skills, employability skills, and life skills from the most complex pupils all the way up to functional or level 2 functional skills. It's designed to be used from Key Stage 4 onwards. And here's one of our schools say about the framework. We introduce Steps for Life having experienced the benefits of using Connecting Steps. It enables us to assess the relevant skills for our post-16 learners they're developing to prepare them for adult life. Steps for Life has been a very simple format. It's similar to B Squared's other frameworks that we already are using within the school. This means that staff are already competent and confident to use it, and also student information is transferred automatically, which saves so much time. Visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through Steps for Life or any of our other assessment frameworks. But that's it for today. So thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Sendcast. So goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Bye, everyone.